Hey guys, and welcome to the greatest Legendary Lord video of all time. We're going to be looking through the Legendary Lords of every single faction and determining which one is the best, and that is of course for multiplayer and the competitive scene as a whole, and how they rank up and all that good stuff, how expensive they are, items, abilities, and why personally I think they are the best Legendary Lord for that faction. Now bear in mind, of course, this is going to be very opinionated. There may be one or two controversial decisions in there, as well as some who I think are pretty much nailed on. Do let me know down below in the comments section if you guys have, do a list of your own factions and your own favourite Legendary Lords and give me the reasons why. And up first, it is going to be the Beastmen, and boy oh boy, is this a really tough one to crack, because I would argue there is 3 Legendary Lords in this faction who could all fight, and rightfully so, for that top spot. And no, I'm not talking about Khazrak One Eye. He can sit in the corner and cry, I'm afraid, next to the basic arse lords. This is a Legendary Lord video, and Khazrak doesn't fit that category, unfortunately. It is instead going to be Morga the Shadowgave, Taurox the Brass Bull, and Malagor the Dark Omen, all rooting for that top spot. Now, the Shadowgave is getting a lot less love than he once did, because he was, for the longest time, the dominant Beastmen Lord, and there's certainly good reason why. Coming with those Chaos Spawn summons, been very tanky and hard to kill, but there are some new entities in the game in the form of Taurox the Brass Bull, an absolute beast who can go toe-to-toe with a lot of characters and big monsters, but my best Legendary Lord pick for the Beastmen shall be Malagor the Dark Omen. Now, if I had said this a few months ago, you'd have said, Duck, you're an insane madman, and now you still may be saying that, but you've got to hear the logic in this. Malagor the Dark Omen is ridiculously fast with 110 speed, a fantastic Law of Magic as well, which is really versatile, and he's basically unkillable if the Beastman player is careful and protects him nicely. Air Forces can't catch him. Even Tic-Tac-Toe may eventually be able to get on top of him, hit him once, and then Malagor can simply juke and run away. He comes in with a very powerful spell selection of Doom and Darkness, Enfeebling Foe, the Pendulum. We also have Mantle of Gorok, Savage Dominion, so you can even summon a freaking Cygor, and of course the very powerful Flock of Doom. Items-wise, nothing too crazy. He does have the Icon of Vilification with a +12 leadership, which honestly isn't that bad considering Beastmen, for the most part, almost called them Lizardmen there. Beastmen, for the most part, are relatively low on leadership, but it's not necessarily an item you need too much. It does cost 163 gold, and he's going to be zipping around the battlefield, not really there to support the frontline troops. As for abilities, he's got some really nice ones. Something Wicked comes this way, which is a -4 leadership to the enemy around him, which of course is nice. Unholy Power, giving him improved power recharge rates, Bestial Surge, as well as Wild Heart from their Law of attributes, from their Law of Magic, because he's a crosscaster, he can do 2, and Arcane Conduit. So he's going to be giving you plenty and plenty of magical support, while at the same time basically being unkillable. Of course, Taurox can ramrod into the enemy front line and dish out a ton of damage, but so can a Doomball, so can a Wargore. There is way more options for the Beastmen to be that frontline Wrecking Ball in those large single entities they now possess, but not so many who can dish out the damage like Malagor can from a safe distance, cackling and laughing all the way. So that's going to be my first choice for the Beastmen. Their best Legendary Lord is indeed Malagor the Dark Omen. Up next, we shall be looking at Bretonnia, and honestly, this one isn't even close. The closest we get to this Lady of Mystery and Power is the King Leon Kerr, but he falls massively short of course, the glorious Fey Enchantress. For 300 gold, she can come on a unicorn, and that is 9 times out of 10 how you're going to be seeing her. She is damn slippery. Only 15 armor. You would reckon, we can catch her and kill her quite fast. But oh no, she has 15% missile resistance, a whopping 60% magic resistance, meaning one of the most common ways to snipe enemy characters, particularly squishy ones like casters, is Spirit Leech spam, Fireball spam, and it's going to do absolutely squat all to the Fey Enchantress. For some reason as well, She seems to be able to slip through the enemy units really well. I guess her model design is quite sleek, so she can get out of really dangerous situations, and she is a Law of Life caster, coming in, of course, with a very powerful law there. Earthblood's particularly fantastic, Regrowth, Dwellers Below, Shield of Thorns, Flesh to Stone, and Awaken of the Wood, all of those spells can be considered to be pretty damn competitive. She does, of course, shine as well with her items. Chalice of Potions basically is a free Comet of Cassandora ×2. That can never go too badly wrong. But the real reason that she is so powerful, of course, is the Mist of the Lady, one of her Lord abilities, which you will be taking every single time you bring the Fey Enchantress. You need to do this. -5 melee attack to anyone around her is always quite useful, and again, makes her that little bit more tanky. But more importantly, it is a Mortis Engine effect. It does damage to everything around her. You protect her with double Paladin, as is the kind of meta, who give her Guardian, make her even more tough. She can solo entire builds. It is very scary. She also, of course, comes in with Arcane Conduit to give it even more magical support, and Favour of the Fae, a lovely little buff that lasts 44 seconds on a allied unit, gives an additional 40 melee attack. I'm sure this one's not going to be a surprise to anyone. Fey Enchantress is seen 9 times out of 10. I do love Rapance and Alberic, but they're not even close, and the King, he's trying to claw his way to the Fae, but unfortunately he can't quite catch her. And you may see a theme already. We have 2 spellcasters up here so far. Both Malagor and the Fey Enchantress do have a massive bonus over their melee counterparts, and that's the fact you're getting your Lord and your Spellcaster wrapped into one. That is fantastic value for money there. You don't need to get a Brave Shaman, you don't need to get a Damsel, you just have it all in one contained package, and that is so useful in a game like Total War Warhammer, where funds is everything. You really do have to try and save money where possible and build your army as tightly as you can. Next, we're going to be looking at the Dark Elves, and once again, much like the Fey Enchantress, this one is an easy slam dunk, and I'm going to give you guys a brief few seconds to guess who it is. And yes, if you said Marathi, you were 100% correct. Hellebron's cool, Malice is cool, Loki is cool, and Malekith can be pretty decent in quite a few matchups, but Marathi, she is the real powerhouse, and arguably the reason Dark Elves are competitive in tournaments is solely down to this rather horrid lady. 9 times out of 10 you will see her on her mount as well, which does give her the ability to zip around the battlefield as she can fly. Then it is a flying Pegasus, and it only costs you 400 gold. Now there are a few matchups such as the Vampire Counts where it's worthwhile pinning her on her ground and with a nice little defensive box around her, but for the most part you're going to see her up in the skies. She comes in with some absolutely ridiculously powerful abilities in the form of Enchanting Beauty, -10 melee attack and 10% charge bonus to all enemies constantly around her is like incredible. -10 melee attack is really good, but you can combine this as well with one of her items, the Heartrender and the Dark Sword, which again, if she is in melee, gives -10 to that melee attack as well as the melee defense. That's -20 melee attack, anything she is touching. That is so goddamn powerful. And she also comes with another useful item called the Wand of Caradon, which is basically a free little shot down from the sky, pretty good at assassinating characters and doing some good fat juicy damage. Apart from this, she comes in with Deadly Onslaught, which is nothing to write home about, but does indeed have Greater Arcane Conduit, Spiteful Conjuration, as well as Life Leech, and all pretty useful abilities. You can honestly take all of these. Deadly Onslaught is one you'd most likely drop if you could, but Enchanting Beauty, as well as her item, the mighty Heartrender and Dark Sword, are an absolute must. Now, if we look at a Law of Magic, it's not the craziest powerful in the world, particularly because you have Power of Darkness there, a spell you never really want to take. But apart from that, it's pretty good. Doom and Darkness is solid, likewise is Soul Blight. Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma is a bit more niche, but if you do a little bit worried that your opponent is going to go with some fast, zippy units, you can drop this on them to lower their speed. She has Petter Shades as well, which is certainly good fun to use, but more importantly, Soul Stealer. Soul Sealer is an air effect spell, which I'm sure you guys have fallen trapped to a few times. If you bunch up round Marathi, which you kind of need to do to kill her, because she is such a powerful duelist, particularly up in the sky with her debuffs and the fact she is anti-large with her halberd, then you need to bunch up around her, and then she springs her trap. Soul Sealer will drain everything in that air effect and give their life points to Marathi, making her even stronger, souped up, and back in the game. Now, she can be a little bit squishy to long-range pressure, but she's so fast and a small target, unless she gets netted, it is really hard to finish her off. A very sticky, annoying character, and once again, we have another spellcaster here on the list. It is just really cost-effective having both of those, spellcaster and lord, combined together. She's very fast, she's anti-large, she's armor-piercing, with a pretty decent stats all round. Only 40 armor, 3,432 HP, but melee attack 55 and defense 40, combined with those debuffs to the enemy, makes her one of the best duelists in the game. A very scary foe indeed, and coming in with 105 speed, there's not too much which can catch her. Talking of fast-moving units, up next we're going to be looking at the Dwarfs. And for the Dwarfs, for the longest time, it's kind of bounced around between a few different. At one point, the Rune Lord was very competitive, although he's not in today's list because this is simply Legendary Lords. But then it kind of mantle did pass on to Belegar, Ungrim in some instances. Grombrindle was dominant for a very, very long time with the use of his Flash Bomb, but he has since, unfortunately, dropped it and not been able to find it once more. Ungrim is very cheap and competitive, but by far, in my opinion, the most competitive Legendary Lord for the Dwarfs is the new one, Thoric Ironbrow. By God, is this dwarf a big pain in the butt. And the reason I think he is the best unit, or best Legendary Lord for the Dwarfs, is he works perfectly with the general way Dwarfs like to play, which is very wide, cheap infantry, a load of guns, and just grinding out your opponent, and he supports them really nicely on his Anvil of Doom. Now, 9 times out of 10, I would recommend taking the Anvil. Not only does it give him some more powerful buffs, increasing his tankiness as well, but you do get a really useful rune from it, which gives a fear and extra melee attack map wide to the rest of your faction. It's called the Rune of Doom, and it's very powerful. It's basically a similar item that Imric the Dragon Prince has, but you can cast it as many times as you would like. Now, plus 24 melee attack and fear is pretty good for 16 seconds, but when you consider it's map wide with cost-effective infantry, that becomes pretty damn disgusting, and the Rune of Doom alone is one of the reasons Thoric would probably tank out any of the other Dwarf Lords on this list. Now, he does come in with a load of powerful runes. He can bring the Rune of Negation, Rune of Oath and Steel, Rune of Wrath and Ruin, Rune of Breaking, which is actually quite good. More importantly, the Rune of Speed, which is a very powerful buff he can do to troops. Another plus 24 melee attack. So if you combine this with the Rune of Doom, oh yeah, you're getting plus 48 damage, or 48 melee attack for any dwarf within the area of effect. It is hilarious. He also comes in with Rune of Slowness, which again kind of counteracts the fact that no Dwarf Lord anymore has Flash Bomb, though you do now have that instead on your engineers. But Rune of Slowness, very, very good indeed. As for items, he does only come in with the one. It is Thoric's Rune Armor, and it gives a 40-meter radius, extra 15 armor, and 10% flame resistance. Not necessarily needed in a lot of matchups, but does have some quite niche applications. For example, up against Beastmen, when a lot of players like to bring Torx the Brass Bull here, he does flaming attacks. Give all your people flaming resistance, so it certainly can be a nice little inclusion, though isn't necessarily necessary. As for his abilities, we have the Master of the Ancient Law, Rune of Hearth and Home, which gives immune to psychology to dwarfs. You don't tend to need that because dwarfs do like to stick out and have a good fight anyway. And Forge Fire, which is a minus 15 armor to the enemies around him, which again is quite nice depending on who you're up against. You're not going to need that if you're against Norska because they don't have any armor in the first place. He comes in with the Locus of Power, which is an amazing ability. So, if there is an enemy caster within 100 meters, if they cast, they will guarantee a miscast. That doesn't seem like much, because technically it is the They suffer minor miscasts, which is like a low dice roll for the miscasts, but this is happening every single time. This has really helped the dwarfs out in matchups such as the vampire counts, where their lord needs to get in the action, but is guaranteed to be a spellcaster, and they need so much magical support that, yeah, the locus of power exploding your casters left and right really can be quite nasty. He also has a whopping on his chair 40% magic resistance, 15% missile resistance, as well as 25% physical. With his full kit, he does come in at a pretty expensive 2,630 gold, but you're going to take off most of those runes, and maybe not bring in all his items and abilities, and it'll come in somewhere roughly about 2 grand, which is certainly worth it for a lord as powerful as Thoric Ironbrow. Up next, we're going to take a brief little look at the Empire. Now, Karl Franz did dominate for a while. People do seem to like Marcus Wolfhart quite a bit, but I think this is another very easy slam dunk, at least in my little duck opinion. Feel free to disagree. But the twirling mustache villain himself, Volkmar the Grim, is absolutely disgusting, at least from what I think. I think if Volkmar the Grim was in a more powerful faction, people would be demanding that he gets nerfed into the dirt. He is a regenerating beast of war. Now, he does have several different mount options. You can bring him on foot, on horseback, or a barred warhorse, but 99.99999% of the time, you want to take him on the War Altar of Sigma. It is going to pay you back an extra 800 gold, but it turns him into a giant wrecking ball, which can simply wander around the battlefield, kill an infinite amount of infantry, which basically can't stop him, and he can even go toe-to-toe in some duels as long as he is supported with his abilities. So he has a Benediction, plus 8 leadership, not too terrible. Divine Power, given a map-wide extra 50% chance to miscast. But then we have the Grand Hammer of Sigma, Grand Shield of Faith, and the Grand Soulfire. Soulfire turns him into a infantry killing machine, which he already is anyway. He's on one of the most powerful magic chariots in the game, but you come in with Grand Soulfire as well, and just like that, you can murder lightly armored infantry. Grand Shield of Faith makes him tanky, and Grand Hammer of Sigma makes him a bit of a beast of a duelist. You always want to be taking Jade Griffin, which is his item. It's going to put you back another 195 gold cost, but does restore 8 hit points per second. That is some very, very powerful regeneration, and for a lord who on his mount already has just shy of 5,000 HP, who is unbreakable and causing terror, being regenerated on top of that is so tasty. He's got a pretty impressive 100 armor as well, not the fastest chariot, coming in with 50 speed, and his melee stats are nothing to write home about. 20 melee defense does mean he's going to be getting hit quite a bit, but that 100 armor and regeneration should keep him in the action quite a bit. What do you guys think of Volkmar? I think he's very powerful in a lot of matchups. He is the kind of sole reason Empire can play that matchup and be competitive. There's very few matchups where I would not take him. Dwarfs maybe being one of those, but I've seen some mad lads bringing Volkmar the Grim in that matchup still with good success. Of course, his fire and magic damage not helping him out too much there. But Volkmar, he's the bane of many a Total War Warhammer players. Kills infinite amounts of infantry and then buffs up his elite troops and ranged troops to take down the enemy characters and cavalry, which could threaten Volkmar the Grim. Synergizes really well with a large majority of Empire builds. Up next, we're going to take in a cheeky little look at the Greenskins. So Greenskins, of course, have gone through quite a few changes recently. We have Grimgor, the best of the best, but unfortunately, he's not the best of the best in this build. Skarsnik, Azag, Wurzag, all very good contenders for this top spot, particularly considering Grom the Paunch did receive some nerfs, but alas, I do still think Grom is on top. Now, this one's close. Azag and Wurzag have really nice applications, but in some matchups you really don't want to take them either, and for the most part, Greenskin characters are very easy to snipe. That is not the same with the mighty Grom. He's tanky Chariot, one of the few non-spellcasters that we've seen so far on today's list, but he's very similar to Volkmar. Regeneration, anti-infantry, will kill wave after wave of ground forces, but one bonus he has, which Volkmar doesn't, is he is a very, very powerful duelist, at least in comparison. He comes in with the abilities Language of the Boys, given immune to psychology, extra leadership, and melee defense to all the lads nearby. That's pretty powerful, considering one of the main weaknesses for Greenskins is their leadership. Likewise, a big weakness for greenskins for the longest time was having their lord sniped. Sniping Grom is an absolute task. Yes, he does come in with a bit of a fire weakness due to his regeneration, but yeah, it doesn't really matter when you have 4,000 or just shy of 4,000 HP regeneration and are incredibly quick with 84 speed across the ground. He comes in as well with the Drayton is here, once again buffing up leadership, base weapon damage and melee attack of all the lads. For his items, he has a Lucky Banner, which does give 24 extra melee attack to himself, turning him into an absolute world beater assassin. But more importantly, it gives 40% damage resistance. Just take that in for a second. You have a lord who has 100 armor, decent HP, regeneration, and you can give him 40% damage resistance for 25 seconds. It is very, very scary. He also comes in with a pretty unique item, Axe of Grom, which gives him armor sundering, extra base weapon damage, and armor piercing. You pop that at the same time you pop Lucky Banner, you can go toe-to-toe in a duel with just about any character in the game. Now, Grom has been nerfed slightly, as have the Greenskin forces as a whole, but my god, he is definitely still super annoying to deal with and a very powerful melee combatant. Decent leadership for a Greenskin, of course. Good speed, solid attack with 40 and 30 melee defense, and a whopping 430 weapon strength. All of this boosted by the fact he comes in with 90 charge bonus, which of course is very tasty indeed. Up next, we're going to be taking a look at the High Elves. Now, for the High Elves, again, I feel like this one is a pretty easy slam dunk. Teclis is the closest to this mighty lady, who can be very good. Elfarin, Alafanar, Tyrion, Imric, they can all do well, and I've seen them perform very good in the competitive scene, but are pretty niche, and you tend to have to design your build all around them. High Elves at the moment are pretty weak, but they do have some really, really powerful and dirty tactics they can bring, and most of them revolve around chariots or single entities and single entity monsters dominating the game. How do you get the best out of them? With some insane level healing. Yes, it is the Lady Alarielle the Radiant, who is the best legendary lord for the High Elves. She comes in with a few different mount options, and you will see the majority of them. She can be on foot for 200 gold, you can plop her on an elven steed, a barded steed for 250, which is one of the options you're less likely to see, or a Great Eagle. Now this is very common. It costs 550 gold, is incredibly swift, and will get her to where she needs to be on the battlefield. Occasionally she will roll horseback style with a couple of nobles to protect her as well, similar to how the Bretonnians do it as well with the Fae and the Paladins. But Alarielle does have one or two tricks up her sleeve as well. She does not come in with the same drain effect, which makes Fae so powerful, but she has some really useful items herself. The Boon of Isha does give immune to psychology and magic damage to nearby homies. She comes with Arcane Conduit, Shield of Saphri, and Life Bloom. All pretty useful abilities, right? But her items are where she absolutely shines. Shieldstone of Isha for 170 gold will give everyone in a 40-meter radius 10% physical resistance, which is quite tasty. She also has the Stave of Avalon, which does give better power recharge rate and stops her from miscasting, so again, can be quite nice. But more importantly, one of the best items in the game, particularly when combined with dragons, chariots, single entity nobles, all of these glorious characters, is the Star of Avalon. It restores 1080 HP, and this is Air of Effect. You can cast it twice. It lasts for 27 seconds. It's 200, I believe you can cast it within 200 meters, and it's a small little radius which does pop down, but you can certainly drag all of your elite troops in there and get them healed up. It will heal a max of 3 at any one time, but to be honest, if you have more than 3 rather expensive units taking damage, you're probably in a really bad losing situation anyway. You can use the Star of Avalon twice, and it will cost you 172 gold for the privilege, and that is really not terrible whatsoever, so plenty of potential for healing, and it does not stop there, because with her spells, she can indeed bring Earthblood. No regrowth from her, but she's a bit more flexible than other casters. Air cores have become more and more popular, some like to call them air cheese in fact, and she can counteract that pretty much herself, because she has one of the most powerful spells for dealing with those air threats, and that is Tempest, so she can catch out Hawk Riders, gunnery bats in the sky, you name it, she's going to be able to catch it. The rest of the spells are pretty powerful as well. Shield of Thorns, Banishment, Fast Protection, and Arcane Unforging are all very powerful spells that you are likely to see. Probably Arcane Unforging the least of those, but all the others you will definitely see in tournament play. Combining L'Oreal with Dragons, Nobles on Chariots, White Lion Chariots, she can be very, very powerful. Now, Teclis does run her close, though. You can't count him out. He's a very flexible caster, able to heal as well as net troops, and nets can be very powerful. But at the same time, if you really want a net build, you can simply bring in a light caster as well. Nice and cheap one, stick them on foot, and simply bring them with that one net spell. But L'Oreal, for me, is by far and away the best Legendary Lord for the High Elf forces. Up next, we're going to be looking at the Dino Boys, the Lizard Men, my favourite. And they have some really awesome options. Of course, there is Nakai the Wanderer, Gorok. But both those guys kind of fall to the wayside a little bit. There is some argument to be made for the majority of the other Legendary Lords. Tic-Tac-Toe is fast and really hard to kill, but does lack punch. And that is kind of a problem for him compared to someone like Malagor, who is likewise really hard to kill and really fast. But he's going to be bringing that magical superiority, whereas Tic-Tac-Toe is going to be bringing a bit more of a damp lettuce swing. We have Crocky G, very good at assassinating enemy targets. Oxyotl, who likewise is now one of the most powerful characters for the Lizardmen. Though I would argue not the best, but still very good. They have to stalk, hide, and be very good damage per kind of value for himself. So Henowin has been greatly improved with the buffs to his Law of Magic. He's a very flexible lord as well, but the big Don, Lord Mazdamundi, though he was nerfed in the last patch, and to Henowin, Oxyotl, Tic-Tac-Toe, Nakai all got better, I don't think they've quite yet managed to eclipse Lord Mazdamundi. Now, you can bring him on his floating chair, which does look pretty damn cool, I must say, but for a rather expensive premium cost of 1,250 gold, you get the supreme ruler of the Lizardmen, Zlak, the largest stegodon to be found anywhere. Zlak has served Lord Mazdamundi faithfully for almost 500 years. Now, much like many other Legendary Lords on this list, he is indeed a spellcaster, one of the most powerful in the game. But you chuck your spellcasters, who tend to the most part to be a little bit squishy, on top of a huge, heavily armoured Stegodon, Mazdamundi's HP is going to be 7,575 with a whopping 130 armour. It is ridiculous. Now, melee attack and melee defense, even on Zlak, isn't going to be fantastic, but he will come in with a whopping 70 charge bonus and 480 weapon strength, so when he hits pretty damn hard. There's some little skinks riding dirty on him as well. They will be poisoning the enemy with their long-range javelins. Now, as far as abilities, spells, and items are concerned, he does have Rolling Skies, which is okay. It debuffs flying units, so it really depends on the matchup for that. More importantly, he has Greater Arcane Conduit, very powerful. Shield of the Old Ones to protect key parts of the battlefield. 2 free banishments, as well as 2 free ruination of cities. You combine those with some Quattles, and you can get a disgusting amount of Vortex spells coming into the game. Now, they're both a little bit random, but a lot of people to counter Lord Mazdamundi will bring units like Halberds, Phoenix Guard, Chosen with Halberds. Drop Ruination on them, drop Banishment on them, and you can really send them packing. Likewise, a lot of people try to net Mazdamundi and then obliterate him with long-range pressure. If you get net, simply drop these spells on their range units, and even if it doesn't do the most damage, it will disrupt them into, once again, you are free. He comes in with some ridiculously good spells. He can heal himself up, as well as other large single entities with Apotheosis. He does have Comet of Cassandora and Arcane Unforging, which I would argue are both a little bit less competitive, but he is the very powerful Curse of the Midnight Wind, a powerful Hex which lasts 25 seconds, minus 30 armor and 24 melee attack is pretty juicy. Harmonic Convergence can turn himself into an absolute world beater, an extra 24 melee attack and defense for 22 seconds. How hard Mazdamundi hits, onto a Zlak that is, with the Harmonic Convergence popped, is really very powerful, and he has arguably the most powerful spell in the game, or at least up then, kind of top 5, Net of Amantok. Being able to pin your enemy in place for 20 seconds, particularly when you have banishments to follow it up, is very, very powerful indeed. Now, I have kind of spoken quite a bit about Lord Mazdamundi building on his mount, but he's equally good and far cheaper on foot, but is a bit more susceptible to being sniped. slants, for the most part, are quite slow, but thick at the same time, so breaking through the HP can be quite a challenge, despite the fact they are a slow-moving target. Here's a very powerful item as well, which was nerfed recently, but still very good. The Sunburst Standard of Hexotl will give you 10% missile resistance, plus an extra 10 armor, and 10 more armor on Zlak that will bump you up to 140 armor. You are one of the most tanky spellcasters in the game, able to deal out damage to infantry by clearing the path on the mighty Stegodon, assassinating characters, particularly when buffed up and on the charge, and bring Magic Fiery Fury to the battlefield. He is really expensive, but again, remember, he is your caster and Lord rolled into one. And I think in the majority of matchups, Lord Mazdamundi, though not the top Don he once was, dominating the Legendary Lords, with Tehenowin and Oxotl sniffing at his kind of heels there. But for me, just about Lord Mazdamundi is still number one, particularly with the aid of that Terror as well. And he's so tanky with the healing, he's most likely going to be around in the end game. And if Lord Mazdamundi is around in the end game, the Lizardmen can do no wrong. So up next, we will be looking at the mighty Norska. So Norska, what do they have to offer? Unfortunately, not an awful lot. There is only two legendary lords for Norska, and that is Wulfric the Wanderer and Frog the Troll King. So who would be the best legendary lord? A basic manlin who likes to challenge people, or the mighty king of all trolls? Unfortunately, it is going to be Wulfric the Wanderer, and he is a bit of a badass. He's a Viking man, myth, and legend, who is one of the best duelists in the entire game. What the Norskans lack in versatility in legendary lords, they certainly make up with power. Wulfric is a very, very good lord. Unfortunately, no spellcaster legendary lords though for Norska. Now, Wulfric can come in multiple different forms, and you might want to take basically all of them depending on the situation. So, of course, he can come on foot. For 200 gold, you can plop him on a horse. 400 a chariot, and a whopping 1,300 gold to place him on a war mammoth. Now, this is the most likely way you will see Wulfric. Tends to be a horseback or mammoth, but certainly there are matchups where being on foot or on a chariot would be a big advantage for him as well. But the war mammoth is the most often picked, and the reason for this is Wulfric the Wanderer is an assassin. He's a duelist. He's designed to kill enemy characters. The War Mammoth can push himself through the front line and get on top of those targets, and he hits even harder when on the back of his mighty beast. Now, it is a bigger target all round, but it does also mean he's going to be fantastic at wiping out infantry, so it brings him a little bit more multitask. Can kill lords, can kill heroes, can kill all your infantry. He is a big, big boy, coming in with over 10,000 HP. Of course, causes fear and terror, and comes in with that 15% missile resistance that all lords and heroes have anyway. He does encourage his troops. He does indeed, a lot of people don't know this, comes with the Rage ability, much like the Berserkers, which means the longer he's engaged in combat, the better he shall become. And if he's in combat all the way up to stage 3, this can become a very powerful 10% physical resistance, 8+ leadership, and 5 extra melee attack, meaning in the late game, he can certainly bring it to you pretty effectively. As for his abilities, he has Foe Seeker, like a lot of basic lords do, but then things start to get pretty interesting. He comes in with Sea Fang, which is a wind-style spell. It's got Frostbite attached to it as well, which lowers your speed, but realistically, it causes pretty solid damage across a battle line. For example, on top of archers or a front line, it can wreak pretty devastating damage. It has been nerfed considerably, so it is now a far worse pendulum, but it's still pretty hard to dodge, so you're going to guarantee to get some value out of that. It also comes in with Fight or Die, a nice little buff in 40-meter radius to leadership and melee attack, plus 16 on that leadership, plus 24 on that melee attack. Only does last 18 seconds, but again, adding more attack onto him just increases his chance of hitting the enemy, and on top of that mighty mammoth, 525 weapon strength is very, very scary stuff. He comes in with the rather beautiful Hex, Hunter of Champions, does lower the Lord or Hero's speed by 45%, 30 armor, and 40 melee defense, so he can really slaughter targets rather effectively. Now, his melee attack does go up considerably when he's on horseback or foot, so if you only want him just to kill one character, I recommend bringing him on horseback, but again, on the War Mammoth, he hits like an absolute truck, so that is certainly something to think about. Sword of Torgold is his item. It is plus 90% base weapon damage, which, yeah, can turn into an absolute machine. Though I probably wouldn't take it on the Mammoth because it's simply overkill at that point. It's not extra melee attack. It's not going to help him hit anymore. He's just going to do more damage per hit. But as a Mammoth, he already is going to kill pretty much whatever he does swing his glorious tusks at. Not too much variety for Norskaya today, but Wulfric is certainly a good choice and by far the best of the two lords, though Frog, the Troll King, does have one or two matchups where he can be rather viable as well. Up next, though, it's going to be a faction which certainly does not lack in diversity of lords, particularly good lords, and that is going to be Skaven. Skaven have so many powerful legendary lords. You have Deathmaster Snickich, one of the best assassins in the game, can really, we've spoken about Wulfric assassinating characters, Deathmaster Snickich takes it to the next level. With Queek Headtaker, who's a bit of a meme, but still very powerful duelist. We have Frot the Unclean, a fast-moving, regenerating anti-large lord. We've seen a few of them on today's list already, as well as Itic Claw, who's quite fun and thematic. I love his crazed manic laugh, but he does tie in your spellcaster and your lord once more, with some pretty powerful mount options. But for me, this may be controversial, I'm not too sure other Skaven players think, Lord Skroak has been the dominant legendary lord for Skaven for quite some time, and I still think he has not been dismantled yet, at least as far as legendary lords go. The Grey Seers and so forth can do really good work as well. But Lord Skroak is an absolute beast. Not the tankiest of lords, only 3,500 HP, so he's susceptible to Fireball spam, Spirit Leech spam, and all that kind of standard stuff. But he's got pretty solid melee stats for a rat with only 30 armor. He comes in with 52 melee attack, which is both magical and does also imbue -10 leadership to wherever he hits. But 45 melee defense, he gets flung around quite a bit as well. So if large, Star Dragon, for example, would swoop in to try and take him out, he tends to just get punted and still somehow survives. So he's a decent melee combatant, he has Frenzy, but more importantly, he is going to be a spellcaster for you, and he has some really devastating items and spells, which is what makes him the most powerful Skaven legendary lord. Up first, we have his lore attribute, which is Plague Rash, lowering speed and vigor map-wide, is pretty damn good. But also it comes with the aura of Pestilence, given -5 melee attack to any enemy within 40 meters. That is a large area of effect there to receive that minus melee attack. Combine that with some of the crazy shenanigans assassins can do, and Lord Skroak is going to be very happy ratty indeed. He also has Stand Your Ground, increasing his melee defense and leadership even more. Of course, always good to increase that when you are the Skaven. And he has two of the most powerful items in the game. We have Rod of Corruption, which is a 30-meter radius drain effect, doing big damage. Not very good against single entities, but will certainly clear its way through plenty of chaff. And you can cast this 3 times for only the cost of 180 gold. Yeah, Rod of Corruption is very good indeed. We also have the Liber Bubonicus, for 180 cost, a direct damage kind of mega souped up Spirit Leech, and you get 2 casts of that as well. So very good at taking out single entities as well as taking out masses and masses of infantry. His Law of Magic is very powerful as well. We have Pestilent Breath, which is quite good, Bless of Filth, Wither, Vermintide, Plague, and Pestilent Birth. Both Pestilent Birth and Vermintide are huge to how most Skaven players that tend to like to play. With this Onion-style effect with a load of really powerful weapon teams, you can then summon Clan Rats, you can summon Plague Monks to the battlefield, and just bog down the enemy more and more. And all the while, Lord Skroak will be cackling to himself, running around the battlefield, nuking your units with his rather powerful items. Now, Skaven, you can play basically all of their legendary lords to a competitive degree. Even Tretch, I don't know if I can make an argument for Tretch. I didn't even bring him up earlier on. But even Tretch, I suppose, I have seen win tournament games, so at least he's got that going for him. So the Skaven, much unlike the Norskans, have plenty of competitive options. I've seen the majority of them brought in the setting, in finals events, for example, even. But Lord Skroak does stand out for me, just head and shoulders above the rest of his competition. Up next, we do have the mighty forces of the Tomb Kings. Now, for me, the Tomb Kings have 2 options. That could be their legendary lord. You do, of course, have the High Queen Khalida, but she's simply not on par with I suppose we also have the Grand Meister himself, Katep, but both of those guys, yes, they can be powerful, particularly the Grand Meister himself on his DJ kit, but Archon the Black and Cetra the Imperishable do stand out as the best 2 characters for me, and I think it really does come down to personal preference, this one. Archon the Black can Spirit Leech spam you to death. He has a beautiful Law of Death's toolkit, which is very powerful combined with the Tomb Kings, and some really good items as well. But for me, Cetra the Imperishable is slightly, like the minutest slightly bit better than Archon the Black, and that may be due down to personal preference and the hatred of that Spirit Leech spam tactic, but Cetra for me is slightly more versatile in more matchups, therefore putting him above his undead brother there. He can come with extra mounts than Archon. Archon can indeed come on a horse, but Cetra can come on a horse. He can come on a War Sphinx, or, as I like to bring him, the Chariot of the Gods. All of these options are very viable, depending on the matchup. The Big Sphinx allows him to go toe-to-toe with large single entities, as well as stample all the way over infantry. Likewise, the Chariot gives him some ridiculous speed and mobility, and when combined with other chariots, you can form death blobs around Cetra. But likewise on his kitty cat, he can certainly get the work done as well. As for abilities, he's got a bucket ton of good ones. The Curse is always very good. When he does get weakened, then the enemy around him will start to take damage. He has the Restless Dead, Unyielding Will, as well as the very powerful Wrath of Petra, which is a nice little explosion, can certainly get him out of some dangerous situations. As for his spells, again, really good set of spells. Incantation of Cursed Blade, Incantation of Protection are both very powerful. Vengeance, Righteous Smithing, less good. Likewise, the Skullstorm, but at the end there, he does also have the Incantation of Desiccation, a very powerful hex that will enable him to win big victories. As for items, he comes in with the Crown of Nekahara, which does increase his charge bonus, base weapon damage, and armor-piercing weapon damage, all useful things because it also affects allies, I believe. So if you are going for a triple chariot squad of him, a Tomb Prince and a Necrotect, for example, the Crown plus the Blessed Blade of Petra means they can do some insane, disgusting burst damage. He is anti-large, of course, armor-piercing, armored, and once more, as we've seen so many times already today on the list, is a Spellcaster. Spellcaster so powerful in Total War Warhammer. So Cetra just about nips it ahead of Archon, in my personal opinion, due to the fact he is indeed more versatile in more matchups. Now up next we have Vampire Coast, and I think my pick here may be slightly controversial. It's really close. So they got the 4 legendary lords. Only 2 of them are in contention for the best, and that is Luther Harkon and Count Noculus, both bringing completely different aspects to the battlefield. Luther Harkon on top of his Terrorgeist can snipe out your lords with deft efficiency. Pretty good duelist in the sky as well, with some good debuffs. Big breath attacks as well. You only ever really want to bring him on the Terrorgeist though, and that's kind of what's slightly dragging him down my list. Count Noculus, an equally capable combatant, and I think actually fits Vampirates slightly better than Luther Harkon himself. And I think people might get upset over this one, because Luther Harkon is generally considered, I think, by a lot of people, the best legendary lord. But I think Count Noculus is slightly, very slightly better. If you want just a super tanky lord who can raise dead, heal up your troops with a pretty cool actually set of spells he has all round, and just summon spam the enemy to death as you drag them through wave after wave of zombie, all the while your opponent is getting blitzed from afar by those guns, look no further than Foot Count Noculus. But likewise, if you want all those summoned zombies still, but want to bring the pain to the enemy long range for 700 gold, you can plop him on a Necrofex Colossus, and all of a sudden he is just 360 no-scoping people across the map. A fantastic assassin in that format as well, capable of taking down key targets, or you simply stick him on foot, he will be the last man standing, no questions asked. As far as abilities are concerned, he has the basic stuff that you would expect from a vampire, but also comes in with Arcane Conduit and Wraithstorm. Wraithstorm, a very lovely bombardment, which does do magic damage as well. For his toolkit of spells, he has Drown Dead, a very powerful summon, Invocation of the Heck, Wind of Death, which can be very fun, Melkov's Mystified Miasma, the Wyvern, and Pit of Shade. So a really good tool selection. 9 times out of 10, you will see him just with the 2 spells, Invocation Heck and Raise Dead. They are very powerful indeed. And his item is probably what is going to set him apart from Luther Harkon, and that is the Captain Roth's Moondial. It can be used twice, and guess what? It's even more summons. So that's an extra 2 summons for free. Well, not for free, I mean, you've got to pay for the item, but no Winds of Magic that you can bring to the battlefield. Now, this one, I think, really can go either way. I understand why people do like Luther Harkin, but if you bring Luther Harkin, you also have to invest in a spellcaster, and that is going to be a rather squishy spellcaster at that. It will be a Vampire Fleet Captain, much more susceptible to being taken out, and if Coast lose their caster, if any undead faction for that lose their caster, it tends to be a massive blow, and you're not going to get that of Count Noctilus because he is very, very tanky indeed. Also does cause terror, which certainly does help out. Has missile resistance and all that good kind of standard stuff you'd expect. Extra powder, and yeah, he's a pretty beast in himself. And that's going to wrap it up for the Vampirates. Only a couple more to go now, and we are going to be moving on to the Vampire Counts. Now, Vampire Counts is a weird one, because for me personally, by and large, their base lords are better than their legendary lords. You're much more often going to see a Strigoi Ghoul King, for example, a Blood Dragon Vampire Lord up in the sky, a Strigoi Vampire Lord. You're going to see these guys a lot more often than you probably will see the Legendary Lords, and they've got a pretty decent selection of Legendary Lords all throughout. You have Manfred von Carstein, who unfortunately is a bit too expensive. Likewise, Isabella von Carstein and the Red Duke, highly underrated in my opinion, but still not quite the best, and less said about Helmengorst the better. He is far better than he used to be, but still not up there with the top dons. It really does come down, for me personally, between Vlad von Carstein and Heinrich Kemmler, and we are going to be going with Kemmler here. Vlad is very tanky. He can endure a bucket ton of damage, has some really good hex abilities as well as his good spells as well. But Heinrich Kemmler is cheap. He's cheap. He's cheerful, and he gets the job done. You chuck him on a Bard War Nightmare. Yeah, but it's Bard Nightmare, I think. Yeah, it is indeed a Bard Nightmare, not a Bard Warhorse there, for simple 250 gold. And even with all his spells, which you certainly would not take, as well as all his items, he's going to cost you just over 2,000 gold. But most likely, with a reasonably respectable toolkit, he'll come in between 1,500 gold and 2,000 gold. As for his abilities, he has the standard stuff. He has a Master of the Dead, the Curse of Undeath, Undeath Resurgent, and Lord of Undeath. So he can summon Krell to the battlefield, and Krell is a very powerful melee combatant, a beautiful summon. Of course, an experienced player may be able to get out of Lord Krell's grasp and just allow him to disintegrate, but he survives for a very long time on the battlefield, so you got to be a little bit careful with Krell. He can catch you out quite badly. His spells are very good. He does, of course, have the standard Vampire Law of Magic here. Kind of Invocation Heck, Dance Macabre, Gaze of Nagash, Raise Dead, Curse of Years, and Wind of Death. A really solid selection of spells, but his items is certainly where he shines. He has the Chaos Tombblade, so if he is engaged in combat, he's going to be resurrecting dead nearby troops. It's because he does come in with an 8 hit point per second resurrection and buffs nearby troops with 5 melee attack. Now, when you think of the undead, it is swarms and swarms of rotten flesh, Graveguard, all of which is a pain in the butt. And likewise, you can even roll Heinrich Kemmler with Blood Knights, and you will be healing them as they go and buffing them. A very powerful ability. He also comes in with the Cloak of Mist and Shadows, which gives him 60% physical resistance. Also gives him magic damage, which can be nice in niche situations, as well as Strider. But that 60% physical resistance makes this rather squishy Heinrich Kemmler, who does have 3.5k HP, very, very tanky all of a sudden. So if you're tanky, very cheap lord who can run around, summoning, healing drastically, and even bring Krell to the battlefield. My personal opinion, Heinrich Kemmler is the best legendary lord for the Vampire Counts, though their basic lords are far and away better, I think, than the legendary ones. But again, that could be a little bit controversial. I know there are a lot of big fans of Vlad out there, as well as probably Isabella and some of the other troops. But up next is our second to last faction today, and that is going to be the Warriors of Chaos. Warriors of Chaos, though they have not been updated for a very, very long time, actually do come in with some very powerful legendary lords. I'm a big fan of Kolek. He's a absolute wrecking ball across the battlefield, and obviously Archaon, Sigvald, and the Giant Everwatch themselves, all very powerful contenders here today, and it does certainly depend on the matchup, this one. For me, Archaon the Everchosen is a pick I go to very often with a very powerful Law of Magic, but it is going to come down to between the Everwatcher and Prince Sigvald the Magnificent, and these guys are basically interchangeable because they serve very, very different roles here. The Everwatcher is a spellcaster who's very hard to kill from long range and can push into the enemy back line, but Sigvald the Magnificent is going to be, for me, the best Legendary Lord for the Warriors of Chaos. I know, I didn't go with the gigantic magical duck. I can guarantee people are fuming at that, and I'm with you, I feel your pain. But hear me out, Prince Sigvald may not be a spellcaster, but my god, is he one of the most tanky, annoying, pain-in-the-butt lords in the entire game. Often you might be thinking to yourself, we'll just ignore Prince Sigvald and kill him at the end. That's the way you're going to do this. But I've seen Prince Sigvald solo so many armies and carry a game on his back. I simply could not pick him here. He's armoured and shielded, an expert melee combatant. He has perfect vigor, which is so good in the late game, and a relatively solid charge defense against all. He's silver shielded, 110 armor, 70 melee attack, 60 melee defense, 520 weapon strength. So not only does he hit hard, he's very tanky as well. His abilities are Slippery, Heroic Killing Blow, and Stand or Die. Personally, I always keep Slippery and Stand or Die because you can increase his melee defense by an extra 48 if you stack those, meaning there is just no way he's going to be taking hits. Heroic Killing Blow's nice, but certainly nowhere near as needed. Where he certainly does shine is going to be with his items. The Auric Armor is a must-have in my opinion, up there with kind of Cloak of Isha for one of those must-pick items in the game. It does restore 8 hit points per second, so that's right, you're given one of the tankiest lords in the game already, regeneration. So that's always good to see. He is immune to psychology, has 15% missile resistance, expert charge defense. He will be encouraging the nearby lads. And that's about it for Prince Sigvald. Able to outduel many enemy characters and absorb just an infinite amount of damage. He is one of the most unsnipeable lords in the entire game. If you're going to kill Sigvald, you can't do it over time either. You need to try to burst it, but it's so hard to do. Or leave him to the end and hope, you pray that you can break his leadership, or you have enough units left to drag it down. Again, the Everwatcher is very close on this list for me. It's very swiftly followed by Kolek and Archaon. All of them are very competitive. The Everwatcher, Unbreakable, Terror, big resistances, a wonderful Law of Metal with Final Transmutation coming in, but Prince Sigvald just about nips it for me. And up next, we're going to be moving in to the last faction today, which is the Wood Elves. And I've had to think about this one quite a bit, and I've had to go with my mind over my heart. We do have Drycha, we have Orion, Durthu, and the Sisters of Twilight. And the Wood Elves are quite unique in the fact that all their legendary lords actually are pretty competitive. I've seen a lot of them brought in the battlefield. Drycha, very cheap, and a spellcaster in one go. Also coming in with some lovely Dryad summons. Orion, an absolute tank. But for me, it does come down to Durthu and the Sisters of Twilight. My personal playstyle of Wood Elves screams at me to pick Durthu right now. But from sitting back and trying to view it from more of a unbiased perspective, although all these things do tend to be slightly influenced, of course, by game experience and what you've played before, I do think the Sisters of Twilight are the best legendary lord for Wood Elves. It's a close thing because Durthu doesn't synergize quite as well with the rest of the Wood Elf builds. He's not as flexible. You have to build around Durthu, and certainly with some very powerful abilities and summons, he can smash out entire armies if played correctly. But if I had to pick one legendary lord, and throughout my Wood Elf career I could only play that lord, the Sisters of Twilight are better in a vast majority of matchups than Durthu. Although Durthu is very powerful, so is Orion and everyone, the Sisters of Twilight are good in so many matchups, so many. They are obnoxious, they are a pain in the butt, they're everything the Wood Elves are destined to become, and are very good at that. They have multi-shot ammunition, they can fire single shots, they can fire spread shots, so they're quite diverse in that sense, and they're actually pretty cheap on their Eagle. Now, you can upgrade them to the Mighty Dragon for 800 gold. For this, you do get way more bang for your buck in a way, in the fact that you get these triple breath attacks and a gigantic frickin' dragon running down on the enemy of those poison attacks. Depending on the matchup, you may want to do this, but likewise on the Eagle, they are still almost guaranteeing themselves that they're going to pay for themselves. And that's probably what ends up tipping me over to going with the Sisters of Twilight is it's very kind of hard not to pay for yourselves if you're the Sisters of Twilight and your opponent hasn't, specifically designed their entire build to kill them, because you can just sit there and shoot casters, you can sit there and shoot characters, artillery pieces, you're very swift and hard to hit. Of course, they cause fear on the eagle and terror on the dragon, so you're fast moving negatives to enemy leadership as well. Their ability, Conjoined Destiny, is fantastic. So they do have to get below 20% HP, but if they survive for 30 seconds after that, they get a massive 1,872 hit points. And this isn't one use only. You can use it twice and hit your healing cap, which is really nice indeed. They do not have any spells, so, one of the few non-spellcasters here today, but I think they're worth it. They basically come with an equivalent called Eagle Quiver of Arrows of Kurnos. Good long-range magic missile, good for taking down artillery pieces, and once again, helping to snipe out the enemy. They're disgustingly fast, they hit surprisingly hard in combat as well, and they're obnoxiously kitey. It is just what the Wood Elves love. Again, massive commiserations to Durfu, who is very close behind on this list. He's a spellcaster, he's a tank, Sword of Day, Flock of Doom. I really want to put him at number 1, but I think the Sisters of Twilight, just about, for me personally, take the top spot. So what do you guys think about my list of Legendary Lords? Of course, people are going to have different opinions, and I welcome you to share what you think the best Legendary Lord is for each faction. I'm actually really eager to see what other people's opinions are. Please don't insult each other in chat, though. I know these kind of things do get quite heated. These are just people's opinions, so be nice to everyone and all that good standard stuff. If you did enjoy this content, please do give the video a big fat thumbs up and subscribe for more Warhammer content into the future. Total War Warhammer content, I should say. I'm also looking to branch out into some other stuff soon, but did you enjoy this type of video? Let me know down below in the comments, and I can certainly make more. They take a little bit more effort than my standard video because there's a little bit of editing and stuff involved, but honestly, it's been good fun thinking about the units and going through them all. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and yeah, as I said before, let me know down below in the comments. If you would like to support the channel, there are links in the description to my Patreon channel, but likewise to my Discord, where you can submit replays to me, get involved in events and tournaments that I host, and chill out with a load of cool people. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this one. Until next time, peace, peace. And as always, stay awesome.